Good morning, everyone. I'm Apeksha, Assistant Professor in Indraprastha Law College, and I'll be taking your subject Interpretation of Statutes. So, this is just a introductory video about the syllabus. What all we are going to cover in this semester. This is an introductory video. Starting with the course shall comprise of the following. The first unit, that is introductory, meaning, purpose and scope of interpretation of statute. So firstly, what do we mean by interpretation? From which term, what do we mean by this? Basically, this term has been derived from the Latin term interpretary. Now, what does that mean? Interpretary means to explain, expound, understand, or to translate. So similarly, interpretation is also the process of explaining or expounding or translating any text or anything in a written form. So basically, it would involve act of discovering any true meaning of any language which is used in any statute. So interpretation of statutes is the correct understanding of the law. So basically, this is a process. It is adopted by the courts for determining as to what is the exact intention of the legislature while he was making a law. What was their exact intention and how to then they interpreted it. So it's very important, extremely important, because it's not just that the court have to read the law, but they also have to apply it in a meaningful manner to suit from every case to case. And in any kind of confusion, so there are many kind of things, we will read about it. But basically, I have just told you what is this interpretation of statute subject is about. Right, so we'll be starting with the first course unit, which is introduction, meaning, purpose, scope of interpretation of statute, the nature of the statutes and the classification. Right, then in the second one, we'll be dealing with internal aids of this internal aids of to interpretation, then title, preamble, headings, marginal notes. It is a long one. What are the internal aids? That is, what all are the internal helps to the interpretation. So we'll understand that. Then the third unit will be same, the internal and external aids to the interpretation. Now, external aids are parliamentary history, stare decisions will understand what is this, the judicial precedents, dictionaries, and so on. These are the external aids, and there are some internal aids as to how to interpret it. What are all the external and internal aids of this interpretation? Interpretation of what? Of statutes, right? Then moving forward with third unit. Third unit will be rule of statutory interpretation. Now there are some rules as well. After understanding about internal and external aids, we'll be reading about rules of statutory interpretation. Now they are further divided under primary rules and secondary rules, literal rules, golden rule, mischievous rule. These are very important rules. Golden, mischievous, mischief rule, literal rule, they are very important, right? Then judicial activism. Then fourth unit is very important, judicial activism. Then presumption and statutory interpretation. presumption as to jurisdiction, presumption as to prospective operation of statutes. Then we have presumption against violation of international law. So fourth unit is very important. Now what is judicial activism? We'll be understanding this. So basically it's a judicial philosophy, that the courts can go beyond their words of the constitution or any statute in order to consider any broader societal implication of their decision. So we'll understand about it when we'll do unit 4, all the cases under it. Then after 5th unit, 6th we'll be doing about the maxims of statutory interpretation. Now these maxims will be eschudum generis and so on. There are many. Noster resources, redendo singular singulis. After maxims, we'll be doing interpretation with reference to subject matter and purpose of statutes, the penal statutes, taxing statutes, welfare legislation, prospective, retrospective operations, principle of constitutional interpretation, harmonious construction. Now, we'll be understanding, as I told you, explained you about interpretation. Then the other thing which we will study under 8th unit, which is very important, is about construction. Now what is construction? So it's like you're drawing conclusion of the subject which are beyond the direct expression of the text. We'll understand it. Basically construction refers to, what does it refer? That you are drawing a conclusion from any written text which cannot be expressed which are beyond the outright expression of the legal text. So it refers to drawing conclusions from the written text. And interpretation, I told you, it refers to the exposing the true sense of the provision of the statutes and to understand the exact meaning of that word which is used in any text. So basically construction purpose is to see the legal effect of words in the written text of that statutes. That we will have to understand what is this. We'll also understand it as in form of difference, interpretation and construction, then principle of constitutional interpretation, harmonious construction, then doctrine, harmonious construction will be there, then doctrine of pith and substance, these doctrines of colorable legislation, occupied field, repugnancy. So it is very vast and in detail we'll be doing. So we totally have 8 units, out of which almost everything is important. So that will be it for the syllabus, and from the next lecture we'll start with the introductory, that is the meaning and purpose and scope of the interpretation of statutes, the nature of the statutes and the classification. Now moving on to the books recommended. So there are these books: Apeksha Singh by Interpretation of Statutes, D.N. Mathur, Interpretation of Statute, Principle of Statutory Interpretation by G.P. Singh, right? And Interpretation of Statutes and Legislation by R.D. Srivastav. So you can go for these 4 books are recommended, and you can see as to for your reference. That's it. We'll be starting with the first unit from the next lecture. this is all about interpretation of statutes, and I have told you what does interpretation of the meaning of this subject. The meaning of this subject, and we'll do it in detail from the next lecture. Thank you.